hello Ignition Radio listeners, welcome to Airtime of the Geek. It's Monday and it's 1pm GMT if you're listening live via our website or via TuneIn. If you're listening to the 1am repeat, it's 5pm Pacific, 7pm Central and 8pm Eastern. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and our channel. You can send comments, queries, suggestions to me on Twitter at AirtimeGeek or Instagram at AirtimeOfTheGeek. You can email me, it's paulaB@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. You can look me up there, my name is Airtime Geek. And don't forget to like my Facebook page, it's facebook.com/airtimeofthegeek. Or you can call in the studio, the number's 01642 645 827. Today's show is sponsored by Sakabutsu on Etsy. The link will be in the description. It's the 9th of May, which means Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 3, Oathbreaker aired last night, and we're going to be recapping it later in the show. Let's do the geek news. I have decided that the heroes of Legends of Tomorrow are so useless that I am now rooting for the villain. Long may Vandal Savage reign. Rory clearly learned nothing from his time on the TARDIS. He is the world's worst time traveller. The Power Rangers reboot outfits were revealed this week, to much mocking by Power Rangers fans. The suits look like cheap Iron Man knockoffs, and for the female Rangers, they come complete with high-heeled boots and boob armour. The mocking will continue for the foreseeable future. The producer of the Craft movie has said it's going to be a sequel, not a remake. And the idea of a remake didn't go down very well with fans, not at all. So the idea of a sequel's actually perked people up to the film. No news on any returning cast members, but since The Mentalist has finished and Fairuza Balk hasn't been anything since The Waterboy, I'd say the most important ones are available. Les Mis director Tom Hooper said he wants to have a go at bringing Cats to the big screen. I don't know why. The Russo brothers accidentally confirmed that Captain Marvel will appear in Infinity War. Awesome. And we have a new presenter here at Ignition Radio. His name's Larry. His social media links will be in the video description. Please check him out. He's a very cool guy. So for this week's top 10, we are counting down my top 10 horror movie remakes. Initially, I was going to do a general remakes list, but once I looked over what I'd already listed and realised 7 of them were horror movies, I thought, better theme the list. So, number 10 is The Wolfman. The remake of The Wolfman was released in 2010. The original was 1941. It starred Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins. It was a pragmatic adaptation and more of an homage to its predecessor. Some of the notable differences from the original is that it's now set in 1891 England as opposed to 1940s Wales, and much darker and much more violent than its counterpart. Lawrence Talbot returns from America to his home estate to investigate the disappearance of his brother. Upon arriving home, he learns his brother is dead, and the worst is yet to come. The film adds new characters and expands upon old, and the werewolf designs are kept similar to the designs in the original, and even use makeup effects and costumes instead of relying on CGI. Benicio del Toro was at the forefront of the driving force of this project because he was a huge Wolfman fanboy, and it was very much a passion project for him. Number 9 is Black Christmas. The remake of the 1974 slasher film of the same name was released in 2006. Much like the original, a group of sorority sisters are celebrating Christmas, but the killer who crashes the party has more of a passing familiarity with their house. He used to live there, and he's going to relive the death of his parents. Though received poorly by fans of the original, having viewed both, I have to say I prefer the remake. Yes, it's stupid in many ways, but it's also a fun Utah horror flick. There is a long tradition of releasing horror movies around the Christmas time, so it's always fun to see something so bloody and gory. After all, red is a very Christmassy colour. Number 8 is Night of the Living Dead. The first remake of Night of the Living Dead was released in 1990 by Tom Savini. The original, of course, was 1968. I'm sort of counting the colorization as a remake in foreign languages, just in case anyone writes in. Two siblings are attacked by zombies when they go to visit their mother's grave. The survivor of the duo, Barbara, makes her way to a farmhouse that starts housing others like her. However, their solace is only temporary, and soon they are besieged by the living dead. Why this remake? Well, Tom Savini is a man made of pure awesome. As a director, stuntman, an award-winning special effects makeup artist, as well as an actor, I get excited anytime I see his name on a project and will literally watch anything he's involved in. It's pretty much identical to the original, and normally I question the need for like-for-like remakes. However, it's got Tony Todd and Patricia Tallman as its lead actors, it's in colour, it's made with better equipment, and generally it's more competently made altogether. Sort of an opposing version would be like the remake of Psycho, that was in colour, but it didn't improve the movie at all because the original was made by Alfred Hitchcock on top of the line equipment, and he was a very competent director. Romero, on the other hand, not so much. I mean, let's not get into the clusterfudge that is Diary of the Dead and Survival of the Dead. In fact, actually, I think we're going to have to do a zombie show at some point so we can go into more depth on these issues. Number 7 on our continued countdown of the top 10 horror remakes is 13 Ghosts. 13 Ghosts is a 2001 remake of the 1960 film 13 Ghosts, which obviously you can't see, but one is spelt 13 and one is with the numbers 13. And yes, this was also the influence for the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Someone did ask me about this, so I thought it was worth mentioning. Arthur Cricketus finds himself an heir to an elaborate glass mansion after his uncle Cyrus dies. The mansion turns out to be harbouring a sinister purpose as the in-house machinery starts moving all the glass walls that are inhabited by the eponymous ghosts, held in check by Latin phrases etched in the panels. The 12 ghosts who also make up the fictional Black Zodiac all have their unique backstory. Although these stories were not described in the film, on the DVD production and makeup teams explain their guidelines. All the ghosts were contained in glass prisons, and with the help of a psychic, Cyrus tries to restore order and try to catch them. The rich additional material has gone into a wide part of what makes the fan base for this film very passionate about the movie, even though it's a standalone with no sequels. The film is also notable for being one of the very few, if not only, marketed to a wide audience, with 3 lead actors of Arab background and it not being an actual plot point. Number 6 is The Hills Have Eyes. The Hills Have Eyes was made originally in 1977 by Wes Craven. The 2006 version was made by French director Alexandre Aja, who is also responsible for High Tension or Hot Tension, depending on which country you're in. Generally, I really enjoy him as a director, particularly as a horror director. The plot of the film is that a typical American family is on vacation and, depending on the version, either cut through the desert to save time or for the trip itself. On the way back, they break down thanks to sabotage and are stranded in the middle of the desert and are terrorised by a family who are mutated from nuclear fallout by a government testing area. Though ironically, they hate the people they rely on to survive and lecture their victims before killing them about how it's all their fault, which is terrifying and sadistic. It can be seen as a statement on what people will do to survive and how the family unit can be corrupted, or as a hardcore Gone flick with some genuinely disturbing images. The 2 versions are almost identical and have both spawned a sequel each. The movies are very squicky, so if Gone isn't your thing, it's probably best to stay away. Stay away from the hills. If you see a hill, run the other way. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter at AirtimeGeek or Instagram at Airtime of the Geek. You can email me, paulaB@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. My username is Airtime Geek. And don't forget to like my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Airtime of the Geek. Or you can call in the studio. The number's 01642 645 827. Today's show is sponsored by etsy.com/shop/Sakabutsu. The link will be in the description. That's Sakabutsu on Etsy. Continuing with our countdown of the top 10 horror film remakes is number 5, House on Haunted Hill. The remake was made in 1999, the original 1959. It was directed by William Malone, starred Geoffrey Rush, Taye Diggs, Ali Larter, Famke Janssen and Jeffrey Combs. The setting of a fateful party is moved to an abandoned mental hospital, the Vannicut Psychiatric Institute for the Criminally Insane, said to be haunted by the malevolent ghosts of the murderous inmates. The head of the facility, Dr. Richard B. Vannicut, performed grotesque experiments on his patients, killing many of them in the process. The hospital was only closed when a handful of inmates escaped, killing almost the entire staff and setting fire to the facility, while the security gates trapped everyone inside. Fast forward to the present, when amusement park mogul Stephen Price is leasing this facility for a Halloween party for his spoiled trophy wife, Evelyn. The 5 invitees are given a similar challenge as in the original movie, only the pot has been upped to $1 million for any survivors, plus the winnings of any of those who do not have any earnings added to those remaining. Soon the party begins. The security gates are tripped and the partygoers are trapped inside the facility, with the insane spirits haunting it, including not only the inmates, but Dr. Vannicut himself. Vannicut was played magnificently by Jeffrey Combs, and if you've ever wondered how they achieved the effect of his creepy walking, they filmed him walking backwards on a hand-crank camera and then laid it in reverse over the top, proving how you can use CGI effectively instead of just throwing everything at the screen. The film marked the debut of Dark Castle Entertainment, which went on to produce 13 Ghosts and House of Wax, the former also a remake of a William Castle movie. It was followed by a sequel, Return to House on Haunted Hill, in 2007, and the sequel sucked balls completely. Number 4 is Dawn of the Dead, a 2004 remake of the 1978 zombie classic. It starred Ving Rhames, Sarah Polley, and directed by Zack Snyder. The film is generally considered to be on par with the original, despite some heavy differences. To be honest, I prefer it. Anna, a Milwaukee nurse, finishes her shift at a hospital where, along with the bits of foreshadowing, she discusses a patient who was bitten during a bar fight. After work, she chats briefly with her cute neighbour child, then returns to a suburban home to a waiting husband. The next morning, she wakes up to find zombified young neighbour in the house. The girl kills her husband, who then rises as a zombie and comes after Anna. Anna escapes in her car, only to learn that overnight the town has fallen into chaos. A living human attempts to carjack her vehicle, causing her to panic, drive off the road, crash into a tree, and knock herself unconscious. When she awakes, she meets up with a police officer by the name of Kenneth, and then a small group of survivors, more or less led by a jack-of-all-trades Michael. They all break into a nearby shopping mall, where they are confronted by a trio of mall security guards, led by the surly CJ. Via binoculars and dry erase boards, they also meet gun store owner Andy, who is stranded alone in the shop across the mall's zombie-infested parking lot. The guards are eventually disarmed and some more survivors are let into the mall, among them teenage Nicole. For a while, the group wallows in the mall's materialism and Anna and Michael edge into romance, but due both to general stupidity, thanks Andrea, and the collapse of the power grid, the situation deteriorates to the point where the group decides to reinforce a pair of parking shuttles, drive to the local marina, and escape out onto an island on Lake Michigan. An attempt to get food to starving Andy ends in disaster, thanks Nicole and Steve, and when the zombies finally break into the mall, it forces the survivors into a premature evacuation. Sorry, Romero fanboys, I do prefer this to the original. I think it's just a little bit more exciting, a little bit more interesting than the original, but, there's nothing wrong with the original, it's just personal preference. Entering the top 3 now, number 3 is The Fly, 1986. The David Cronenberg version is a darker and edgier remake of the original film from 1958. This time, mild-mannered but brilliant quantum physicist Seth Brundle, played by Jeff Goldblum, is on the cusp of perfecting his matter transporter after meeting reporter Veronica Quaife, who's played by Gina Davis, the love of his life. The happiness is too good to last, as he is accidentally fused with a common housefly on a molecular genetic level in a seemingly successful transportation experiment. Rather than creating an immediate monster, Veronica must now cope with the pain of watching her lover literally fall apart on a physical and emotional level, and the awful uncertainty of whether or not the child inside her was conceived before or after the fateful transportation. Most people would be unaware that The Fly is actually a remake. In the original version, the man and the fly swap heads instead of the complete and tense and painful situation Goldblum ends up in. It spawned a sequel, The Fly 2, which has a really cool scene of a man getting his head squished by a lift. But other than that, it's generally terrible, and I only wanted to see it for the brief scene that Jeff Goldblum appeared in, as I fell in love with Goldblum during Jurassic Park. Goldblum is the sex. Goldblum is all the sex. Coming soon, a top 10 of Goldblum. Number 2 on my top 10 countdown is Piranha 3D. Piranha 3D is a remake in name really of the original Joe Dante B-movie, directed by Alexandre Aja, who you may remember from earlier on this list as the director of The Hills Have Eyes. Set at Lake Victoria, a minor earthquake opens up a chasm that connects the lake to a larger subterranean one. The local sheriff, Elizabeth Shue, escorts a trio of scientists to explore the underwater cave, while her deputy chief, Ving Rhames, is left to oversee the chaos of spring break. However, thousands of prehistoric piranha that have outlived their species' extinction by millions of years are now able to escape to the surface, eating 2 of the scientists, then making their way towards the town's very active beach. Also filling out the adult cast are Jerry O'Connell, a Girls Gone Wild-esque producer/director, Christopher Lloyd, a marine biologist, and Richard Dreyfuss, a local fisherman who is the first to get eating in an absolutely brilliant homage to Jaws. As incredible as it may seem, the film actually got many positive reviews for being realistically scary but knowing when to indulge in its B-movie roots. The film works because while it doesn't take itself seriously, it makes an actual effort to be scary. You feel tense when you know that the characters are facing up to the piranha, and in many ways it is the sequel to Jaws that Jaws always deserved. And since Jaws is my favourite movie of all time, please realise how much of a huge compliment from me that is. 2 years later, a sequel was released, Piranha 3 Double D, which was very short and very terrible. It only had 3 good things. Number 1, another Christopher Lloyd cameo. Number 2, the Hoff. And number 3, the blooper reel over the credits, which was actually pretty funny. The rest was not any good at all. So number 1 on my top 10 horror movie remakes is The Thing. John Carpenter's 1982 movie, The Thing, is a much more faithful adaptation of the John W. Campbell novel Who Goes There than its original adaptation, Howard Hawks' 1951 production, The Thing from Another World. It focuses on 12 men who are stuck in an Antarctic camp for the winter of 1982. After finding that neighbouring Norwegian camp has been mysteriously destroyed, they realise that a deadly alien life form is on the loose. Most terrifyingly of all is the fact that the alien can change shape, infecting a person on a molecular level, and then relentlessly absorbing and duplicating their cells, imitating them from inside out until there is nothing human left. Therefore, at least one among them may be The Thing. It stars Kurt Russell, Keith David, Wilford Diabetes Brimley, who is love and life. While a commercial and critical bomb, when it was first released, The Thing is a remarkable example of what time can do for a film. These days, it's very well known and has been very successful on VHS and DVD. In addition, you'll be hard-pressed to find a best scariest horror movies list that doesn't include it, and it is regarded in one of the best uses of paranoia fuel in cinema. Its visceral depictions of anatomically creative life forms adopts when attacking or threatened were milestone achievements in both special effects rigging and creature design, and has been cited as the influence for later franchises like Dead Space. The film is also unusual in the sense that it subverts that nothing is scarier while retaining every ounce of paranoia fuel. It was one of the first films to believably pull off daylight horror sequences thanks to a fusion of masterful puppetry, makeup and award-winning advanced FX rigging, bolstered by new green screen effects like high-end claymation and matte painting and early CGI. By using it for each of these tasks best and combining several different approaches in a single shot to create seamless compositions, Carpenter left surprisingly little room for Nam to set in. In a serious case of tempting fate or paranoia fuel, The Thing, along with The Shining, is screened every year for wintering over at the Edmondson Scott South Pole Station just after the last plane leaves, leaving them in a long winter blackout. Its popularity has caused the story to be continued in other media. In the 1990s, Dark Horse Comics published a series of 4 comic books continuing the film's story called The Thing from Another World. A video game sequel was made in 2002, and lastly, a similarly named prequel focusing on the Norwegian camp prior to the events of the film was released in 2011, starring Mary Elizabeth Winstead, which leads directly into this movie in a fairly clever way, and I generally liked it. And despite what most people actually think, it wasn't overly used CGI. They actually used many, many practical effects. It's just they've gotten so good at them, people just thought that they were CGI. That was my top 10. If you're catching up on YouTube, then please like and subscribe to this video and the channel. You can send comments, queries, suggestions by following me on Twitter at AirtimeGeek or Instagram at AirtimeOfTheGeek. You can email me, it's paulaB@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. You can look me up there. My username is AirtimeGeek. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/airtimeofthegeek, or you can call the studio at 01642 645 827. Today's show is sponsored by the Etsy store Sakabutsu. The link will be in the description. It's time for the Game of Thrones recap, Season 6, Episode 3, Oathbreaker. Special shout out goes to Mark, whose face I also miss. Let's recap that episode. We open on Jon Snow being awake at the wall, because honestly, if they hadn't done that, I think a million Game of Thrones fans would have lost it. So Davos is there, and after they both get over the shock of Jon actually being alive, he helps naked Jon Snow off the table. Melisandre comes in and is more shocked than Jon Snow, which is impressive because he was the dead one. Jon remembers being stabbed, particularly by Ollie the little git. So Davos tells Jon that Melisandre brought him back. She asks him what he saw, and he says nothing. Melisandre tells him that he is the prince who was promised. Davos asks if they can be alone for a moment. Hello. Davos basically tells Jon that even though it's total madness, he needs to buck up. Jon is having a bit of an existential crisis over the whole thing. He feels like he's failed. And Jon emerges to his brothers of the Night's Watch dressed and all non-white walkery. And to be honest, I think the Night's Watch are the only guys who are actually surprised that Jon Snow came back to life. Tormund Giantsbane tells Jon that the men think he's a god, but he doesn't think he is because he's seen Jon's dingle-dangle, and it's too small to be that of a god's. They hug it out, and then Jon sees his friend Ed, aka the last of his mates alive, and they hug it out too. And they look like they might have a bit of a kiss later. Jon makes a joke, and then Ed wonders if it's really Jon in a joking way. We then see a ship stuck in rough waters, and Gilly looks through a porthole happily. Sam isn't as excited as Gilly to be on the ship, and I forget how adorable they are together. Sam's sick, Gilly's adorable. Sam breaks it to her that she can't stay at the Citadel, and he's taking her home to meet his parents. Gilly's a bit annoyed with him. We see baby Sam, who has grown a bit and is utterly adorable. Sam tells Gilly he doesn't care about the world, he doesn't care about the wall, he cares about her and little Sam. Gilly appreciates it and calls Sam the father of her son, which is very touching, and then he vomits again. We then see a man polishing his sword, and that's not a euphemism. I believe it's flashback time as I spy Targaryen symbols on soldiers' armour. We see Bran and the three-eyed raven, who I'm just going to refer to as Ming from now on, looking over the scene. They observe a young Ned Stark and Howland Reed, who is Mira's father, and this is meant to be a big deal to the book readers. I haven't read the books, I've just read the synopsises on Wikipedia. They approach the tower. Bran spots Sir Arthur Dayne again, meant to be a big deal in the books. Ned greets them and tells Dayne he missed him at the Battle of the Trident, which is the battle where Rhaegar Targaryen died. They tell Ned that the prince wanted them there guarding the tower. Dayne wishes Ned good fortune, and there's a good bit of hacking and slashing and sword fighting, leaving Sir Dayne to take on 4 men at once, and honestly, it's awesome. He kills 3 of the men with no problem, leaving Ned last. Bran observes that Sir Dayne is a much better sword fighter, and he doesn't understand what's happening. Dayne disarms Ned, about to defeat him, when Howland Reed pops up and stabs Dayne in the back, allowing Ned a chance to grab his sword and kill him. We then hear a woman and a baby cry. Ming says they've seen enough, and the entire internet explodes with rage as we are prevented from going into the tower. We know what's in there. Bran calls out "Father," and Ned stops and turns around, unable to see Bran. But we hear the scream again and Ned runs into the tower. Ming brings Bran out of their walk. Ming warns Bran that if they stay too long they cannot return. The children of the forest listen as Bran despairs over what precisely he has come back to. Ming tells Bran that he waited 1,000 years as the roots of the tree grow through him for Bran to come, and Bran must learn everything before he leaves. We then cut to Dany and the Dothraki horde. Apparently they've arrived at the Dothraki home for widowed Khaleesi's. The widows strip her off and take her necklace and give her a potato sack to wear. Dany tells them they've made a big mistake. The creepy old lady in the room remembers Dany eating the horse heart and asks why Dany didn't come when Drogo first died, telling Dany that all Khaleesi's end up the same, and if she's lucky, the Khals will decide to keep her there with them. Oh God, Essos is so boring. We see Varys in Meereen, and a young woman is brought into the room, who is one of the ladies of the night who has been helping to kill the Unsullied. Varys threatens someone called Dom, which is her son. Varys tells the woman he'll send her away in the morning with her son to Pentos with a big bag of silver if she talks. We then cut to Dany's small council, where it's really awkward and Tyrion is trying to fill the awkward silence by babbling. Grey Worm doesn't particularly prove himself to be a conversationalist. Tyrion wants to play a drinking game, but the others don't. He's visibly relieved when Varys returns, finding that the masters of Astapor, Yunkai and Volantis are paying for the Sons of the Harpy. Honestly, Game of Thrones, it's getting so boring, nothing is happening there. We then cut to Master Qyburn, who is treating some children. It's been a while since we've seen the Frankenstein, and it turns out that the children are Varys' little birds. Qyburn gives the children candied plums, and it seems he's now using them for his own whispers. The mountain zombie comes into the room, and it's confirmed, as if there was any doubt, that he is Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountainstein, apparently. Jaime and Cersei are also in the room, didn't actually see them enter. Qyburn sends the children off. Jaime wants to send the Mountainstein in to kill the High Sparrow. Cersei has plans to have little birds up and down Westeros. Grand Master Pycelle is complaining in the small council about Qyburn as Jaime, Cersei and the mountain zombie walk in. Pycelle actually poops himself. That's not hyperbole. He actually poops himself. Lady Olenna is there, which is great because she's awesome, and Keevan, Lannister and the rest decide that they don't need Cersei and leave, refusing to speak to them. We see the High Sparrow praying as Tommen comes to see him. The High Sparrow is being a total douche and won't let Cersei see Myrcella's grave. Tommen is super annoyed. The High Sparrow talks some nonsense for a few minutes, and then we go to something interesting. Arya and the obnoxious girl, whose character name I refuse to look up. They train and play the game of faces. Arya is trying to learn to do the things, though she's blind, and is getting better at everything. Jaqen H'ghar gives Arya a cup of death water, and she drinks it, which restores her sight. We then see banners of the Umbers riding through the countryside, passing a few flayed men to the new Lord Crazy Bolton. Great Jon Umber is apparently dead, and the Umbers are annoyed with Jon Snow for bringing wildlings into the north, so they've brought Ramsay a present. And I wish I'd called this last week on the actual show instead of just in real life to my friends, but he's brought Osha and Rickon back to Winterfell. Ramsay couldn't be happier. They've killed Shaggy Dog, which means they're beyond evil. Back at the wall, Ed comes to Jon Snow, telling him it's time. Jon goes out to where the traitors are all strung up, and the traitors are super annoyed that Jon's actually alive. One asks Jon if he'll write to his mother. Thorne can't believe his eyes, but is still unbelievably smug. And Ollie, the little git, Reddit will be so happy. I'm quite happy, to be honest with me. John draws his sword, pauses for a moment, then cuts the rope, hanging the traitors. Yay, Ollie is dead. There's a good long shot of it, and how has this show made me cheer for child murder? John gives Castle Black to Ed. His watch has ended. John leaves the Night's Watch, and the episode ends. Wow, like almost all living Starks in one episode. They honestly should have put Sansa in there instead of the boring High Sparrow stuff. Really, they could have had all the Starks in one episode. High points: seeing Ollie the traitor being hanged, John leaving the Night's Watch, and Bran's flashback. Low points: everything involved with the High Sparrow because I'm so bored of it, and seeing Shaggy Dog be killed. All in all, this episode wasn't as exciting as last week's. It cuts off storylines that were interesting a little too soon and spends a little too long in ones that are super, super dull. The absence of Sansa and the Iron Islands were felt, and it's frustrating that Jaime and Cersei are finally working towards something that the audience can get behind, and everyone is now ignoring them. Lingering questions. Can we see the Umbers die now? Will Sansa miss Jon at the Wall? Where the hell is Littlefinger? Is Gendry still rowing to Fleabottom? When are we going to see the Tower of Joy flashback in full? Is the Mountain Stein going to die again? And if he does, can Jaime and Cersei reenact Weekend at Bernie's? All these questions and more. We'll be doing another Game of Thrones recap next week. That's it for Airtime of the Geek. Tune in next week for more top 10s, news and reviews. Comments, queries, suggestions, you can follow me on Twitter. It's at Airtime Geek. You can follow me on Instagram at Airtime of the Geek. You can email me. It's paulab@ignitionradio.co.uk. You can also take a look at geeky art I upload to DeviantArt. My username there is Airtime Geek. And don't forget to like my Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Airtime of the Geek, or call the studio. The number's 01642 645 827. Today's show was sponsored by the Etsy store Sakabutsu. The link will be in the description, and I will see you all next week.